Hello and welcome to Tête-à-Tête, France 24's flagship interview show. Our guest this week is Vali Nasr. He is a professor of Middle East Studies at Johns Hopkins University, former advisor to the State Department, and his most recent book, Iran's Grand Strategy, was published a year ago. He joins us from Washington, D.C. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you. Good to be with you, Mark.
At the onset of the war with Iran, Donald Trump said he wanted, quote-unquote, unconditional surrender from the regime in Tehran. This Wednesday, he formally signed the 14-point Memorandum of Understanding in Versailles with that very same regime. So this begs the question, is this a victory for Iran?
In many ways, yes, it is. Of course, Iran was completely battered with the aerial bombing. Its economy was greatly hurt by the economic blockade. But the United States was not able to realize its war aims, and nor was Israel able to realize its war aims. And therefore, strategically, the war is ending in Iran's favor, in the sense that the United States and Israel now realize that all options are not on the table with Iran, that the military option does not work. And then Iran's ability to get hold of the Strait of Hormuz and use it against global energy markets and the global economy also shows that Iran is coming out of this war with a strategic asset that it did not have before the war, a leverage to defend itself, to deter against future attacks, and in fact to force the United States in this agreement suggests that it has something more than it had before. I mean, if we listen to the president in Evian yesterday, he said very clearly that the reason he's agreeing to this agreement is because of his fears for the global economy and his fears for an economic catastrophe, as he put it. Iran's ability to threaten the United States and the global economy with economic catastrophe means that it has also options on the table, just like the United States and Israel do. And so at the end of the war, there's some kind of a strategic parity here. And this is a very different narrative than the day before the war.
Right. The other question is whether Israel is the main loser of this war. The Memorandum of Understanding is quite vague on the nuclear issue, but it is silent on Iran's proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others. And even the ballistic missiles, President Trump even said himself that Iran should be allowed to have some missiles. So what do you make of Israel in this war?
Yes, I agree. I mean, the outcome is definitely not favorable to Israel or is welcomed in Israel, for the reason that Israel, for the past 2 years in its confrontations with Iran, had imagined a maximum outcome, a maximum success outcome, that the Islamic Republic could be toppled, that its regime could fall apart, that Iran as a big player in the Middle East and Israel's main rival in the Middle East could be removed from the calculation. And none of those have happened in the course of 2 wars Israel has waged against Iran. And coming short on that basically means that the strategic assumptions of Israel about how to deal with Iran did not work. Iran is still standing, is stronger in some ways than it was before the war. And also, the United States now has come to the conclusion that Israel's theory of how to deal with Iran is not one that the United States either believes in anymore or wants to follow. So the United States no longer sees war with Iran as the path to go forward. And that's not really good for Israel. And then the memorandum actually goes beyond what you said. It not only doesn't say anything about what happens to the proxies, but it actually imposes on Israel limitations in how much and how far can it go into Lebanon and deal with Hezbollah. And the president's comments about Israel's handling of Lebanon, again at Evian, were not very supportive of Israel's strategy. That, in fact, was very critical. But I also think that beyond Israel itself, this is particularly damaging to Prime Minister Netanyahu, because politically, he made a promise to Israeli people after the October 7th events that he would rid Israel of the threat of all of its main enemies in the axis of resistance, starting with Hamas, but most importantly, Hezbollah and Iran. And at this point in time, Hezbollah is there, actually looks stronger than it did a year ago. It's attacking Israel and Israeli forces. And Iran is also still standing and it's there. So after these 2 years of fighting, Israel was not able to really remove the axis of resistance from the Middle East. And in a way, the United States is now becoming reconciled in coexisting with them. I mean, consider the fact that about a week, 10 days ago, President Trump even claimed that there had been a phone call with Hezbollah, which is unprecedented since the 1980s, when that organization first emerged for the United States, which is characterized as a terrorist organization, to actually have a phone call with it.
Right. Donald Trump has been obsessed with the Obama-era deal, the JCPOA, as it's known, back in 2015. Especially, he's been accusing Obama of giving tons of cash to Iran, and that he is not doing the same thing. However, we know that the U.S. will allow Iran to immediately begin selling oil and fuel, and there's also the promise to unfreeze its assets and to create a kind of investment fund. So in effect, Trump is giving financial incentives to the regime he wanted out.
Exactly. It's very difficult not to see this as a major setback for the United States and a major gain for Iran. When this war started, the president demanded, as you said, surrender from Iran. What he's getting basically is an agreement in which he has to give Iran a lot of economic incentives in order for it to sign the deal. And this will breathe new life into the Islamic Republic, which is also something that Israel was hoping it would avoid, that it might make Iran even stronger, at least more stable domestically, if it can address its economic issues with its own population. And yes, it is all problematic, and President Trump can do all kinds of acrobatics in order to say, well, this is not the same thing as Obama did. I'm not giving Iran money. But in the end, the JCPOA was also based on a give and take, economic sanctions relief and some cash for Iran in exchange for limiting Iran's nuclear program. And President Trump ultimately may get different terms after 60 days, but the exchange is going to be the same. He will have to give Iran certain economic concessions or certain concessions from Iran. Maybe in 60 days' time, Iran will give up a lot more. But at this point in time in this agreement, it looks like that the United States is giving a lot more to Iran in order for Iran to agree to stop the war. It looks like the United States is more eager to stop this war than Iran is, which itself is a major statement on the miscalculation that President Trump made in going into this war.
Right. Trump claims there has in effect been a regime change in Iran, a little bit like in Venezuela. He argued that he eliminated Team A, the current leadership, Team B, and now that the current leadership is more pragmatic and even more moderate, which is not what the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights stated just a few days ago. What do you make of this claim that actually the regime now in place is better, and what does it mean for the Iranian people?
Well, I agree that he did bring about, he and Israel, in two wars, not just only in February, but also during the June 2025 war, they did bring about a regime change. And if you kill 135 leaders of a country in a de facto way, there is a whole generation of new leaders that take over. They may be in some ways more pragmatic, but they're also much more hawkish. In fact, the war that the United States confronted, the willingness of Iran to do massive damage to its neighbors, to attack the United States directly, and to escalate with the United States, and in fact force the United States into a war that it did not want, was a consequence of removing the older leadership, which as anti-American and as harsh as it was, had certain reservations about escalating with the US. This new generation actually believes that the only way to confront the US is to be very, very aggressive. So President Trump is obviously, again, playing with words, and is trying to portray things as is much more favorable to the United States, but in effect, it's not. We'll see what happens domestically, because I don't expect that in the nature of the interaction between the regime and its people, there's going to be much change at all. After all, Iran is an authoritarian regime and is going to remain an authoritarian regime. It is now more directly run by the Revolutionary Guards. It's more like a military dictatorship than a clerical one. And its relationship with the people will not change. Of course, it will have now more economic resources to give to the population, which may pacify some of the anger that we saw in the massive uprising of January. And there's also evidence that they're willing to relax on cultural things such as hijab much more than even before the war. But on political freedoms, there's not going to be much change in Iran at all. I mean, in a way, the Islamic Republic domestically and regionally is coming out of this war more confident, more self-assured, and more stronger. The war has not weakened the regime, either at home or in the region. In fact, the opposite. I mean, the narrative in Iran today, Mark, is that they won this war. The headlines of across the board on newspapers yesterday in Iran was highly bullish, highly confident. That's not a regime that's under siege. It's a regime that is saying, we went to war, we stood up to the world's premier superpower, and if we forced it into an agreement that the whole world is saying is a defeat for the US. You don't need to listen to us, just read the world's headlines. And that will translate into, not into liberalization, but actually into confirming authoritarian hold over the country.
Vali Nasr, I want to thank you very much for being our guest here on France 24, and thank you for watching this edition of Tête à Tête.